And I can tell you, there was a college football program that I heard about. And I think in one 12-month span, they had 14 athletes at once. Sorry, 14 athletes at some point in that 12 months that had to rehab an ACL. So they inherited some and they caused a ton. And that guy got a $150,000 pay rise at his next job.
I don't know.
America.
I don't know how that happens.
A lot of negligence. Australia is the only place that I've really seen like he's the speed guy, he's the strength and power guy, they're going to bring in a conditioning guy and so on. And it strikes me that that's very difficult to do, because the human instinct is always that you want your pound of flesh. And well, I don't want to give up my bit if that guy's going to get more and so on. And it almost needs someone like Joycey with that skill set to manage it, because you see other places where you don't have a high performance manager like that, where it is like one hand doesn't know what the other's doing and everybody wants their pound of flesh, and it just doesn't work. But it's strange, you know, in my experience, Australia is the only country where I've seen that model be replicated.
And I don't know where that's, I don't know what was, the chicken or the egg. I don't know if some club put a performance manager in that wanted to have all these people, or a club got all these people in and thought, oh crap, we need someone to actually lead the herd, so we'll put in what we're going to term a performance manager. The AFL is synonymous with having a performance manager, a director of directors, a director of coaching and performance. Like, they've got so many levels, it's beyond ridiculous sometimes. But I've been, the AFL model at the Giants was probably the most like that. Like, there's probably very few even AFL clubs that had as many levels and as many moving parts as we did in that department, and I think it worked very well. Then going to the NRL, obviously far less staff, very different style, but still had that performance model. But for me, anyway, in my department, I didn't have a strength and power and a conditioning. I ended up having a strength and conditioning across both, and that was a discussion with the head coach at the time, Brad. He was very keen. He wanted the person who was making them bigger and stronger to be responsible for any negativity that would occur on the field. And that, what he meant by that is, I don't want someone just getting them big and strong and then saying, well, it's the conditioning guy's job to get them fit. And the conditioning guy is saying, well, I just need to get them fit. I don't worry if they're strong. Now, as we all know, you hope that a strength and a conditioning coach work well together, and they're not like that. But I could certainly see his mentality and what he wanted out of it. And NRL is a different beast to AFL.
It strikes me that what you described would have been the model that I would prefer. Like, not be like, well, you're going to do strength and power for everyone, you're going to do conditioning for everyone. It'd be like, okay, you're going to have the front rowers and loose forwards, you're going to have the edges, you're going to have the outside backs, all that kind of stuff, and then you're across everything. And it's almost like, you mentioned that athlete connection. You're spending a lot more time with guys. They feel a lot more invested in you and vice versa. And then you're able to move all those chess pieces around the board.
Yeah, 100%. And in the AFL side, I can see the value where you are a little bit more siloed. Although you become good at communication, you have to be. You're not actually active as siloed. But we had 52 on our list. Of those 52 athletes, the AFL naturally has a fairly large injury list at any one time. There's a lot of running in AFL, so they do accumulate a lot of overload things. So we could have a list of 11 people that are sitting in this rehab or injury list. So you sort of, when it comes to managing people, like, wow, field was on, I could have 10 or 11 people in the gym. Wow, field was on. And then when they roll through 3, sometimes 4 hours of rotation in the gym in groups of 10 to 14. So it's sort of like, you could see the value where, for me, keeping my focus on that strength and rehab, the power side of it, is of value, because I'm hopeless to them outside, because I don't even get to step outside at this stage, because there's so many people rolling through the gym with so many needs and stuff like that having a conditioning coach, because of the value of conditioning in AFL, in training, they're running 12 Ks in a training session. So making sure they're doing what they're meant to be doing, and then it flows into that, as you know, in Australia and the UK is the same. The GPS sort of love is huge. So having someone managing the GPS loads and being on those type of things, it probably does become a battle that's too big for just one person to be across all of that. So I could certainly see it. But then going to the NRL, it was in my head, I'm like, we'll get someone to run the rehab side. But you're like, 2 people. if you're unlucky.
It's a good problem to have, though, because it means, the squad's healthy. I mean, I don't know about you, but like my rule of thumb was always 10% was my red flag. If we have more than 10% unavailable right now, that's a crazy red flag. And if more than half of those are non-contact, that's a big red flag. And I can tell you, there was a college football program that I heard about. And I think in one 12-month span, they had 14 athletes at once. 14 athletes at some point in that 12 months that had to rehab an ACL. So they inherited some and they caused a ton. And that guy got a $150,000 pay rise at his next job.
I don't know.
America.
I don't know how that happens.
A lot of negligence.
I think there's probably another level to that 10% rule as well. It's what is the quality of those people that are injured? Because I can tell you right now, in the NRL, if one of my top 13 guys were injured, then it's far, even if there's just one, it's far bigger deal than if I had 5 of my bottom 10 injured. So,
yeah, that's the nuances. Like, not all of those stats are created equally. If they are unavailable, is it 1 week and he's back, 2 weeks and he's back, or is it Christian McCaffrey? You look at him with the Panthers. I want to say that he got a grade 1 hamstring, which, if you're about it, is 1 to 3 weeks. He's been out for 3 months and he's going to miss the rest of the season.
Yeah. How people quantify their injuries is very interesting as well. Like, the AFL is starting to get quite strict. The NRL is getting better. But it was like when the injury data comes out at the end of the year, like I look at some of the rankings and knowing who I've spoken to and what injuries they had and injuries were reported. And then I see the end of season injury report. I'm like, this doesn't match up. Like, I don't know how they've managed to have this little injuries when I can go through the history and see that they've actually publicly accounted for a number of higher injuries. So the way they actually class their injuries is all over the place. The AFL is far more strict and a little bit better with it. But yeah, the NRL injury, the way they ranked it, the way they rated their injuries, mate, was very strange. But
I was really obsessed with that at some point in our preparation for Tokyo. And I remember watching, because NRL was one of the first sports out of COVID that had an audience. So people had in stadiums. So it was actually fun to watch. Everything else just seemed staged. Final of the Champions League, there's no one that stands that's not a real game. So I was watching a lot of NRL, and you would see every now and then on the games and the bumps and some niggles and stuff. So I was like, oh, let's see the reports. And I just go into the website, and some clubs have 0 soft tissue injury reports. I'm sure I've watched the game.
Fucking Roosters,
and I've seen a guy walk off holding his thigh, and this club has 0. Wow, they're either really good at recovering or really bad at reporting. Because I was like, there must be something wrong.
It's definitely the second one. But also, in saying that, obviously, I'm only talking from AFL to NRL. They're the only 2 sports I can draw context from. But, in the AFL, a player would turn up in the morning and go, the groin's a little bit sore. And when you put that into an AFL training load, there's always going to be negative things. They're always going to get worse or something's going to happen. So in AFL, that's a huge flag. Whereas in NRL, someone turns up the groin's a little bit grumbly. 90% of the time, they can get through and get no worse because the style of training is very different. They don't have the same run. And obviously, especially in season, they don't have the same running loads. They don't have the same volume that goes into them. And the NRL boys are a lot more tolerant and resilient of things. Often they might complain just as much, but physically they get through it more. So I definitely know from an injury stat there's far less. You look at it and again, you can argue the cows come home, but I think I look at the AFL guys that get smacked, but they often get smacked from behind, from the side, and they don't know it's coming.
Those are the ones that hurt you.
Yeah, exactly. And they're only 80 kilos. But in the NRL boys, they're 120 kilos going front on, but they know exactly what they're going to cop. And that doesn't mean they don't get injured still, but I feel like there's far less injuries in that sense because they're prepared for it. They know what's coming.
Well, they can brace and be ready to get that switch on, switch off that usually pulls something. You're not ready and just really try to absorb the low strength very quickly, but you're not aware. So bang, contact stuff.
The most impressive thing still to this day in the NRL for me is when I went from AFL to NRL, everyone goes, they're such big boys in the NRL, big collisions, huge guys. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. There's some big boys there. But I look across some of the scores. I'll use Parramatta, who I work for. We had 2 guys, Mitch Moses and Clint Gutherson, who were both anywhere between, depending on the day, sort of 82 for Mitch Moses up to about 90 kilos for Guffer, which is pretty much the same as what an AFL player is. They're a similar height, similar size. Mitch Moses, 82 kilos, would be like a midfielder, maybe outside midfielder in the AFL, running and barely getting touched. In NRL, he's hitting 130 kilo blokes. Now, given he bounces off every now and then, he's not quite like a 100 kilo bloke hitting 130, but he would get through the game. And that, to me, that's like, there is this AFL bloke that's fucking hitting these absolute massive monsters and walking away just like it's standard. And I just look at it, like, still to this day, it blows me away. And AFL players are standing there going, NRL boys are so big, like they get smashed, and they're all being like, there's a number of NRL boys that are the same size, same fitness and speed level as you, still hitting 130 kilo blokes, and it still blows me away today.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.